Our bodies are just avatars for us to customize, reflections of the souls that are not from here. Today, my friends, my beautiful pieces of flesh, I have me a tale of terror that should bring its unique form of satisfaction. Do understand, as a host of horror, I am not here to scare you. I am here to make you feel very comfortable. The individual you see before you, Yuki, has a yarn to share, a horror that has robbed her nights of sleep and sanity. Even the slightest itch will send her into a panic frenzy, and I bet we're all wondering why that is. Her story began 3 months ago, after she learned of Hiroko's return from South America. Yuki was a close friend of Hiroko, and concerned over her strange behavior, her reasons for not letting anyone know of her return home. Nearly a month she spent isolating herself from friends and family within her apartment. If Yuki had only known of the beautiful wonders that her close friend had to share, she would have never visited Hiroko on that day and accepted the reality that her close friend had never returned from South America. Immediately, Yuki noticed the condition of Hiroko's apartment. Filthy, unkempt, trash littered everywhere, all the windows kept shut, barely any light within the apartment, and the musty, foul odor lingering in the air. Yuki was thrown off by the twinge scent of sweat, sex, and moldy food. But it was Hiroko herself that Yuki found to be the most unsettling. Her bizarre behavior that showed no care for her concerned friend, nor the world around her. And also the sound Yuki kept hearing, this faint sound of something wet and shifting. And when Hiroko greeted her concerned friend with a cup of tea, the dwelling horrors were confirmed when Yuki saw Hiroko's hand in the light. A gash, an open wound, and the skin around it was shifting, moving, wriggling, and writhing like worms. Hiroko was sick. Something did happen while she was away. And when Yuki finally started to see Hiroko in the light, her flesh pale and sickened, and the strings shifting on her body, the sounds were coming from her, from the things moving beneath her flesh. Hiroko's body was infected, and yet she refused going to the hospital. It doesn't hurt. It does not hurt. And Hiroko doesn't want to see a doctor. She just can't. Yes, much like Yuki, Hiroko was afraid at first. But you see, it's so much more than that. Hopefully, Yuki will understand. Yes, it happened in South America. On one night when Hiroko was camping, she got stung by this fly, and as a result of not applying the appropriate treatment, the wound got infected. Oh, but it wasn't an infection. It turns out that Hiroko was stung by a rare fly that lays parasitic eggs within the skin, which had hatched into larvae, and how they fed on the fats between the skin and the flesh, dispersing themselves in all directions, giving that spider-like nest on her hands. There was no pain, just this unbearable itching. And even though the larvae hatched and left Hiroko's hand, on the first night when Hiroko got back to Japan, she would discover that the parasites had spread it throughout her body. Assuming that all the insects were gone, Hiroko would learn that the infection had only gotten worse. The itching, the burning, the screaming, the tears, the agonizing pain of her flesh being violated. How she tried digging her nails into the skin, open wounds for the parasites to crawl out of. The blood and deep scratches had only brought a pain that was nothing compared to the burning discomfort of the parasites. Every human instinct within Hiroko was to have these worms leave her body. And it wasn't until the next morning, when the itching finally stopped, for the insects hatched and left her body. But it wasn't the same for Hiroko after that. The part of Hiroko's story that Yuki, nor anybody, will understand. Yes, the pain was gone, but something felt different. An emptiness within Hiroko. Nothing felt interesting after that experience. The tunnels that were dug by the larvae was still there, an opening into her flesh, like another hole yearning to be filled with life. And even though Hiroko will never forget the painful itching, there was an immense desire to feel it again. The sensation of the larvae digging into her skin. And after 2 or 3 weeks of trying to find the specimen that could dig into her skin, all kinds of larvae, worms, mites, centipedes, unfortunately none of them had the strength. They all died quickly. Until Hiroko found a parasitic worm from South America and was finally reunited with that experience. The pain. Oh God, the beautiful pain on her hand. The tingling sensation coursing throughout her body. The crippling mixture of discomfort and comfort. The wetness between her legs. But Hiroko felt that the right hand was not enough, which is why she had cut a deep hole into her other hand, letting another parasite make its way into her flesh, and then putting another at the soft flesh beneath her foot, and several areas of her naked body. This pain was so exquisite, and all those regrettable nights, for there is no man, no human that can give Hiroko the same satisfaction. Which now begs the question, how can Hiroko go to the hospital and take away the very thing that gives her so much life? And now, here we are today. And I don't think you can imagine the traumatizing horror on Yuki's face when seeing the worms and parasites pulsating beneath her skin, pushing themselves from the corner of Hiroko's eyes, her nose, mouth, every opening, the life on her face wriggling and writhing, the blood and head juices seeping down to her chin. If Yuki only knew that beyond the burning pain, there is pleasure, a bliss, unlike anything she experienced. That was when Yuki screamed in terror and fled Hiroko's apartment. As I said, my friends, if Yuki had only known of the events, she would have never visited Hiroko and accepted the idea that she lost her friend. But the most regrettable part of her story is when she decided to visit Hiroko a month later. No answer when knocking on the apartment door. Our caring and foolish friend who decided to enter that dingy apartment when noticing that the door wasn't locked. The odorous smell being much stronger, and the air more dense. All her senses were immediately sickened. To Yuki's horror, not only could she hear the sounds of flies in the air, but that wet, shifting sound was much louder this time. And on the mattress was Hiroko, on her knees, naked, incoherent. Yuki could see the dried blood, sweat, and crusted filth all over Hiroko's pale body, showing no response to her surroundings, until she began lifting her head to see her friend, Hiroko's breathing becoming more heavy, faster. Yuki watched as Hiroko started to go into a fit of pain and orgasms, the pleasure growing more intense, the shifting getting louder, and the eyes protruding from their sockets as the worms danced violently throughout her body. The worms was forcing themselves from her eyes, nose, ears. Hiroko's moaning began turning into wet gargling. Thin lines of fresh blood was now streaming from her face. Yuki was frozen with terror over the horror show that was happening before her. And it all happened within mere seconds. Hiroko's head and body split open, like a bubble of flesh and rotting meat bursting into a swarm of worms and parasites that spewed before Yuki. As of now, my friends, Yuki is traumatized from the horror of that day. The nightmares of the worms dancing in the flesh, the sounds of wet shifting and Hiroko's moaning that would cause her to wake up screaming. And the days Yuki would descend into a panic frenzy when feeling a small sensation on her body. An itch. The unscratchable itch.
All men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds wake in the day to find that it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dream with open eyes to make it possible. This